Welcome to Noha's narrative where everything feels real and something hides deeper. The man with the mop, Walter Grimm, stood in the front of the mirror inside a small supply closet on the fourth floor of Grimm and Associate downtown branch. He wore grey overalls, scuffed work boots, and a faded cap pulled low over his forehead. At 53, he had the kind of face that blended into at 53 he had the kind of the face that blended into the background when he wanted it to. Sharp eyes behind the ordinary features, a calm mouth that rarely gave anything away. He had done this before 3 times in 12 years. Each time he had walked into one of his own company branches as a janitor and stayed for 2 weeks. No assistant, no phone calls to the office, just a mop, a bucket, and open ears. The idea had come from his father, a man who spent 40 years as a factory floor worker before Walter built the business from a single consulting firm into a corporation with 9 branches and over 400 employees. His father used to say, "You will never understand a place until you have cleaned its floors." Walter believed him. He picked up the mop and walked out into the hallway. The office just waking up. Computers hummed to life. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the break room. Voices floated through the open plan workspace as employees filed in through the glass doors. Coffees in hand, bags over shoulders, faces still carrying the quick weight of the early mornings. Walter moved slowly, mopping near the entrance, head down, face steady. Priya arrived at exactly 8:14. She was the receptionist, a young woman with dark hair pulled back, neatly, and genuine smile that reached her eyes before it reached her mouth. She noticed Walter immediately. "Good morning," she said brightly. "You must be new. I am Priya." Walter looked up and gave a small nod. "George," he said. That was the name on his fake ID badge. George Hilt, temporary cleaning staff. "Welcome to the maid house," George, Priya said warmly. "Welcome to the mat house, George," Priya said warmly. "If you need anything, break room, supplies, anything at all, just ask me. I know where everything is." Walter smiled and went back to the mopping. He watched the office fill up over the next 30 minutes. Owen, the team leader, arrived and immediately began checking in with his people. A word here, a note there, the quick steadiness of the someone who cared about the work and the workers both. Hattie Brooks, silver-haired and sharp, settled at her desk with the efficiency of someone who had done this job long enough to make it look effortless. Raj Menon, the youngest in the room by at least 5 years, fumbled with his laptop bag and knocked a pen holder off his desk. Priya appeared beside him before he could pick it up and helped him collect everything without making him feel small about it. Then Dennis Holbrook walked in. He was tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident stride that expected always to clear for him. VP of Sales. Walter had reviewed his numbers strong, his conduct reviews. Tinweg signed off too quickly. Dennis barely glanced at anyone as he moved through the office. He stopped beside Priya's desk and dropped a thick stack of folders onto her workspace without a word. Priya looked up. "Good morning, Dennis. Those need to go to the Whitmore gym by 9, Dennis said flatly. "And get me a coffee. 2 sugars, no milk, and not the cheap stuff from the machine. The real stuff from the 3rd floor kitchen." Priya nodded pleasantly, "Of course." Dennis walked to his office and shut the door. Priya looked at the folders, then at the clock, then at her own work that was already spread across her desk. She took a quick breath and began organizing Dennis' files with the same steady hands she had used to help Raj with his pens. Walter had seen enough already to form a first impression, but first impressions in these exercises had fooled him before. But the first impressions in these exercises had fooled him before he pushed the mop forward and moved toward the break room. As he passed Hattie Brooks' desk, she looked up from her screen and caught his eyes. "Morning," she said simply. "Morning," Walter replied. She studied him for one brief moment, not rudely, just carefully, then returned to her work. Walter noted that a woman who saw people, those were always the most important ones in any room. He filled the mop bucket in the supply closet and stood a moment in the quit. 2 weeks here, 2 weeks watching, listening, learning, the floors would get clean, and so would everything else. What the mop sees. 3 days had passed since Walter Grimm first walked into the Grimm and Associate downtown branch as George Hilt, the quit janitor with the grey overalls and the faded cap. 3 days of the mopping always, whipping down counters, emptying bins, and watching. He had learned a great deal. He had learned that Raj Menon stayed an extra hour every evening to finish his reports properly, not because anyone asked him to, but because he cared about getting things right. He had learned that Hattie Brooks brought homemade food on Fridays and left it in the break room with a small handwritten note that read, "Help yourself, no name, no fuss." He had learned that Owen Slade never took credit alone. Every time his team hit a target, Owen sent a group message listing each person by name and what they had contributed. He had also learned a great deal about Janice Holbrook. On Tuesday morning, Janice had walked past Raj in the corridor without acknowledgement, even though Raj had greeted him directly. On Wednesday, Janice had sent a company-wide email taking sole credit for a client deal that Walter knew from the files he had reviewed before the trip had been a joint effort between Owen's team and the sales division. And on Thursday morning, Janice had spoken to Priya in a tone that Walter had heard used on machines, not people. But it was Friday that changed everything. Walter was cleaning near the break room just before noon when he heard raised voices. He slowed his pace and listened without moving closer. "I told you this needed to be on, with more desk by 11. Dennis said. His voice had that particular sharpness that some people practiced until it felt natural to them. Priya's voice came back steady and clear. "I sent it at 10:45. Dennis, I have the confirmation email. Then why is Whitmore calling me asking where it is? I can forward you the confirmation right now if that helps." What would help is if you did your job correctly the first time instead of making me chase things down. A pause. "I did do my job correctly," Priya said quickly. "The files was sent on time. Don't argue with me, I don't have time for this." Walter heard footsteps and then the sound of the break room door swinging. He moved around the corner just in time to see Janice disappearing down the corridor toward his office. Priya stood at the small kitchen counter, her hands flat on the surface, her head down for just a moment. Then she straightened, picked up the coffee she had been making, and walked back to her desk. Walter stood very still. He thought about 12 years of quarterly reports and branch evaluations and spreadsheets full of the productivity numbers. He thought about how easy it was to look at a company from the top floor and believe you understood it. He thought about his father's mopping factory floors for 40 years and knowing the name of every single person he worked beside. He picked up his mop and followed the hallway toward the main workspace. At 12:30, something happened that Walter had not planned for. He was cleaning near the large window at the east end of the office when his bucket caught the edge of a power cable running beneath the desk beside him. The bucket tipped. Water spread first across the floor in a wide pale arc, sliding toward the nearest desk, which happened to the Raj Menons. Raj jumped back from his chair, paper scattered His laptop bag slipped from the desk and it hit the floor. I'm so sorry, Walter said immediately, moving to stop the water with the mop. No, it's fine, honestly, Raj said. Quickly, he crouched down and began picking up his papers, checking his bag. These things happen. Are you hurt? Walter blinked. I'm not hurt. It was my fault entirely. Don't worry about it. Raj stood up and looked at the spreading water. Here, let me help. There are extra clothes in the cabinet beside the printer. He went and got them before Walter could say anything. Together, the two of them cleaned up the water. Raj worked without complaint, without looking at his watch, without making Walter feel the weight of the mistake. When it was done, Raj looked at him with a straightforwardness, kindness. Honestly happens to me all the time. Last week, I knocked at an entire cup of coffee onto the photocopier. Hattie helped me clean it up and told me a story about the time she accidentally sent a client a spreadsheet full of her grocery list instead of the quarterly report. Made me feel a lot better. Walter laughed, a real laugh. You have been here a few days now, Raj continued, settling in all right. Getting there, Walter said. Good. It's a decent place. Most people here are good people. Raj paused and glanced toward Dennis' office without elaborating further. Then he picked up his bag, straightened his papers, and sat back down at his desk. Let me know if you need anything, George. Walter nodded slowly and pushed the bucket back toward the supply closet. He passed Priya's desk on the way. She was on the phone, calm and professional, walking a client through something with patient and careful explanation. She caught Walter's eye as he passed and gave him a small smile, the uncomplicated kind that people give when they simply mean it. Walter thought about Janice's voice in the break room. He thought about Raj on the floor collecting papers. He thought about Priya straightening herself at the kitchen counter and walking back to her desk without a word of complaint. He thought about what his father used to say, you will never understand a place until you have cleaned its floors. He understood this place now. Tomorrow, George Hilt would hang up his overalls for the last time, the man behind the mop. Monday morning arrived the way most important mornings do, quietly without announcement, looking exactly like any other day. The office filled up in its usual rhythm. Computers hummed, coffee brewed, voices crossed the open workspace in casual morning exchange. Raj arrived and settled at his desk with his laptop bag, placed carefully this time, far from the edge. Hattie Brooks came in with the small container of food tucked under one arm and placed it in with the break room without telling anyone. Owen Sledge moved through the office greeting his team by name, pausing at each desk for a genuine moment before moving to the next. Priya arrived at 8:40, same as always. She sat down, organized her desk with the quick efficiency and began her morning without drama or complaint. Dennis Holbrook walked in at 8:40, dropped a folder on Priya's desk without looking at her, and went directly to his office. Walter Green watched all of it from the far end of the hallway. He was wearing his grey overall for the last time. The mop was in his hand. The faded cap was pulled low over his forehead. He had spent the weekend reviewing everything he had seen and heard during his 2 weeks at this branch. He had filled 12 pages of a small notebook with observations, names, moments, patterns of behaviors. He had read through Dennis Holbrook's full personal file again, this time with new eyes. He had also made 2 phone calls, one to Carla Jennings, the branch office manager, letting her know who he was and asking her to gather the core team in the main conference room at 9:30. The second call was to his legal team at 9:25. Walter walked to the supply closet, placed the mop against the wall, and took off his cap. He opened the small bag he had stored there since Friday and changed into the clothes he had brought. A clean white shirt, dark trousers, and the simple but well-made jacket that anyone who had ever seen his photograph in a business publication would have recognized immediately. He looked at himself in the small mirror on the inside of the closet door. 12 years of doing this, 12 branches, over 12 years he had found accidents in unexpected places and failure in uncomfortable ones. He had promoted 4 people directly from these visits and any 2 tenures that no performance review had managed to address honestly. He closed the supply closet door behind him and walked toward the conference room. Carla Jennings met him in the hallway. She was a composed woman in her mid-40s with steady hands and the kind of calm that came from genuinely knowing her job. She had taken the phone call on Friday without panic, confirmed the details professionally, and said simply, "I will make sure everyone is there." "Thank you, Carla," Walter said. "Of course, Mr. Grimm." They walked in together. The conference room held 8 people. Owen Slade sat near the middle of the table, relaxed and attentive. Raj Menon sat beside him, looking slightly nervous in the way that young people look when they have been called into a room without a clear reason. Hattie Brooks sat at the far end with her reading glasses on and her hands folded, unbothered. Their 3 other team members filled the remaining chairs. Janitor Brooks sat at the near end of the table with the particular confidence of a man who assumed meetings had been called on his behalf. Priya had been asked to join last, and she came in just as Walter took his place at the head of the table. She looked around the room with a small, uncertain expression, then found a seat near the middle. Janice looked at Walter and frowned. Then he looked more carefully. His face changed. "Good morning," Walter said to the room. "My name is Walter Beam. I am the CEO of this company. For the past 2 weeks, I have been working in this office as a member of the cleaning staff under the name George Hilt." The silence that followed was the particular kind that happens when a room full of people all have the same thought at the exact same moment. Raj's mouth opened slightly. He looked at Walter's face and then looked at the face of the janitor he had helped clean up spilled water with on Friday, and then looked back at Walter again. Hattie Brooks made no expression whatsoever. She simply nodded once, as though confirming something she had already suspected. Janice had gone very still. "I do this periodically across our branches," Walter continued, "because I believe that the truest measure of the company's health is not its quarterly numbers or its clients' retention rates. It is how the people inside it treat one another when they believe no one important is watching." He looked around the table slowly. "What I observed here in 2 weeks told me a great deal." He paused. "Raj Menon, you stayed late 4 out of 5 days last week to make sure your work was completed properly. You helped the janitor clean up a spill without a second thought and without making that person feel embarrassed. That kind of character is rare and it is matters here." Raj looked at the table and then back up. He said nothing, but his expression was open and genuine. "Hattie Brooks, you have been with this company for 19 years. The food you bring every Friday and leave without your name on it has not gone unnoticed. Neither has the way you treat every person in this office with equal steadiness, regardless of their position." Hattie nodded again simply. "Owen Slade, your team performs because you lead with fairness and shared credits. That is exactly what leadership is supposed to look like." Owen gave a quick, grateful nod. Then Walter turned to Priya. "Priya, on my first morning in this office, you welcomed me without hesitation. You offered help to someone you had never met before and had no reason to assist. Over 2 weeks, I watched you handle every challenge placed in front of you with patience, professionalism, and consistency that this company needs at every level." He looked at her directly, effectively, immediately. "I am recommending you for promotion to Office Operations Coordinator. Carla will walk you through the details this week." Priya stared at him. Her hands were flat on the table. For a moment she said nothing at all. Then she said, "Thank you, Mr. Green. I will not let you down." "I know you will not," Walter said. Then he turned to Dennis. Dennis was already sitting differently. The easy confidence had left his posture. He was watching Walter with a careful expression of someone rapidly recalculating. He was watching Walter with a careful expression of someone rapidly recalculating. "Dennis," Walter said. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "I witnessed on multiple occasions the way you speak to your colleagues. I heard the conversation in the break room last Friday. I observed the email sent Wednesday that you raised the contribution of 6 people from a deal they had built. I reviewed your conduct history before I came here and I found a pattern of complaints that had been quickly managed rather than honestly addressed." Dennis opened his mouth. Walter continued without pause. Walter continued without pause. "This is not a conversation. I'm informing you that your position as VP of Sales at this branch is terminated. Effective today, HR and legal will speak with you privately after this meeting. Please use that time to listen." The room was completely silent. Dennis stood up slowly. He looked up around and the table as though searching for someone to object. No one did. He picked up the folder he had brought in with him, the same folder he had dropped on Priya's desk that morning, and walked out of the conference room without a word. The door closed behind him. Walter let the silence sit for a moment. Then he looked at the remaining faces around the table. Raj with his honest expression, Hattie with her steady calm, Owen with his quiet attentiveness, Priya with her hands still flat on the table and her eyes bright. "I started this company because I believed that good work and good character belong together," Walter said. "Not one without the other. What I saw in most of his room confirmed that belief. I want you to carry that forward, not because I was watching, but because it is simply that right way to work." He stood. "Carla will follow up with each of you individually this week. Thank you for your time." He walked out of the conference room and down the hallway toward the supply closet. One last time, he opened the door, picked up the faded cap from the shelf where he had left it, and held it in his hands for a moment. His father had worn a cap like this every single day for 40 years. He had known the name of every person he worked beside. He had mopped floors and carried things and done the invisible work that kept places running. And he had done it with a dignity that no title had ever given him and none could ever take away. Walter placed the cap back on the shelf. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and rode down in the quit. Just a man in a clean white shirt, carrying nothing but what he had seen and what he now knew for certain. So the end of the story is trustworthiness and the honestly working people always get reward. Thank you so much.